that's...
You only have to do it once.
Everything's related to everything else. What rate did you put it down? What was the crop? What was the soil? What was the climate? You know,
I mean, the Amerindian soil was how deep? 3 meters deep?
What's that?
Wasn't it Terra Preta 3 meters deep?
Yeah.
So they obviously did it more than once.
Yeah.
You know, they just
the
kept adding.
Making soil.
Yeah,
See,
it makes itself.
Yeah.
What I just was saying about compost. I mean, actually, I had an epiphany just a moment ago. I mean,
what we're talking about, my God.
There's a great video. Gosh, it was done by the BBC, and it's
El Dorado or something?
El Dorado.
Yeah.
El Dorado?
Yeah, and it's
Is it on the internet?
yeah, it's YouTube.
Okay, and also the International Biochar Initiative website you want to go to. Tons of information there.
International.
IBI, International Biochar Initiative.
Char Grow, John's site.
If you just put everything, go to Living Web, we'll put it all there.
Oh, okay. Hey.
I just had a...
Okay, I had an epiphany. Remember my describing my problem in the greenhouse?
Yeah.
Too many nutrients and all that? I know about biochar, right? But I'm used to waiting till we get the machine up and running or making enough to put large amounts in. And so we're using John's highly concentrated, loads of food, little bit of charcoal to have very good effect. I need to just go get a whole lot of that charcoal, leach the ash off, hit it with soluble nutrients. We won't use pea because of the cootie factor, not because it wouldn't work. We'll use fish,
Low
right?
salt nutrients.
Right? And get it into the compost.
And get into the compost.
That's
what I was saying a long time ago. I said, let's get granular char and just put it in and get you start using it.
And we need to get into there.
We're working on making char here, so we can focus there.
I was just going to say, when's that workshop?
Next year.
Next year, yeah. But meanwhile, I could solve my base saturation problem with charcoal.
Yeah.
And here I knew it, but I had to listen to John give him the talk to go,
You had to hear it one more time.
solution, you know, because I'm used to just doing it one way. You get locked into like, this is what we do. No, we need lots more charcoal in that greenhouse.
You're trying to capture calcium?
We're trying to get more cation exchange capacity because we're overloaded with calcium. Calcium has got the base saturation at 99, you know, and we got a pH of 74. I mean, 7.4 rather, you know.
Yeah, that's a pretty high pH.
Yeah.
And you're using humic acid a little bit?
We're using humic acid in the tea, but we should probably use more humic acid too.
Well, that'll break down some of the calcium.
Yeah.
Make it more available. But yeah, so there's a situation where char would work. USDA called me a couple years ago because I was doing a big project, and they have these laser graded fields. I mean, they're so freaking perfect out west that all the water runs to one point when they irrigate. And they're like, well, everything's leaving that point. Shouldn't we put a char box there? I said, definitely. And that's what they're doing. They're making a char box, so all the water runs up and it hits that char box. Now, granted, there's pesticides in there, but all the nutrient losses, they're stuck in the char now. It's going through the char filter before it comes into the drain pipe and leaves. Now you take that char box that you've been loading all summer, and next spring you spread it on the whole field.
But if you were doing best practice, you would treat it with compost tea or in a compost pile because they would break down those pesticides.
Yeah, that would help it, sure.
Yeah, the microbes would break down the pesticides.
Right, but since they think the pesticides are fine, they probably won't go that way. You know?
Yeah.
But if you don't think the pesticides are fine, let life break down those pesticides.
So what we're into now is the last portion of our thing, which is synergy. It's like these are all just biological tools, right? And they all work to some extent by themselves. Everybody's played with cover crops, although the next round you're going to see the state of the art of cover crops, the fertility number 2.
That's May 19th. Don't miss it. Dr. Ron Morse. He was the lead scientist, the go-to scientist for the conventional no-till revolution that happened in America. He's retired. He's a professor emeritus now at Virginia Tech, and he's retired into low-till organic. He's hooked up with John, and they are doing earth-shaking things. I mean, incredible stuff.
So we've got 5 years of trials at Virginia Tech, and I have a loaded charcoal, which is called Char Grow. It's trademarked, and been making it for years, and so it's a bioinoculant. Just to show you how concentrated you can get all this stuff, it's so concentrated you can put in a potting soil at 2% by volume. It's a 5-gallon bucket. You put 2 cups in it, and the rest is all potting soil. And you mix it really well, and you grow your transplants. And the transplants, at the time of transplants, could be as much as 25% bigger. But once you put them in the ground, you can't tell. It's just gone. But then those ones that had the char grow yield earlier and yield more. And the average over 4 years is a 51% increase in yield at first picking. And first picking is usually a week or two early. So that's worth some serious money to some growers. And to me, I think I finally maybe hit the ultimate synergy. And I'm sure others are working on it and other things. Some people are doing char with fertilizers, char with acids. There's all kinds of stuff going on over the world because they've seen that this stuff can do it, and it solves some of the problem of the composter who can only ship his compost so far because it weighs too much.
Yeah.
So now your potting soil made with compost can only go so far, but now you could have super light potting soil with 2% by volume, now it can ship further. So there's another level to the synergy that's kind of taken in everything we're doing. The char grow is going to be too hard for most everybody else to make, but you can certainly make great compost, great worm castings, blend them together with char, make your own formulas. 20% by volume works pretty good, so do that, and you'll see you'll be able to really build long-term fertility that you can't get by compost alone. You can't get it by worm castings alone, you can't get it by compost tea alone, you can't get it by cover crops alone. You put them all together, and now things really start to take off, and that's kind of the final take-home message of this part of it. Next time, they're going to be talking about how you integrate the cover crops and paying attention to how you balance soil fertility along with soil biology, so soil chemistry and biology.
Low-till methods, so you're not just, every time you work the soil, you're just using up organic material.
You're burning carbon.
You're using it up. You're making our problems worse in the world, and you're working harder to try and make your soil good at the same time that you're making it worse with your tilling. So it's not like you never till if you grow organic because you get perennial weeds, you have to, but it's about low tillage. And Dr. Morris has developed small farmer technology for that. So small farmers, and indeed now I've learned that Leon down near Earth Haven has made a roller for cover crops for a walk-behind tractor, so I'm going to try and get him to come too and show that even on small scale we can do no-till. And then what Dr. Morris has also done is utterly ace the cover cropping. He basically gets a great cover crop that he starts in the fall, he turns it under in the early spring, first chance he gets, sows a second cover crop, which does spectacularly well in the cover crop, and then puts John's plants out with that. And so it was so serendipitous that the scientist I knew who I could hook John up with was getting into this wonderful synergy already, and the synergy together is incredibly dynamic.
Yeah, Pat, actually, I was on my way to Virginia Tech to talk to the turf side, the sports turf side of the university, because they were interested in the char grow for sports fields. And I'm talking to Pat, he's like, well, these people will be there, and then pretty soon I got the number, and they're going to eat lunch at a certain time, they're going to eat pizza, and like, you can stop in and talk to them while they're eating pizza. So I'm meeting my brother on the sports turf, so I was like, look, dude, I got to get this done early, because I got to do this other thing.
It always helps that there's food, by the way.
Yeah, food lures me every time.
That's the next. Good to know.
No, next one's going to be disease. I'm doing that one.
And that's on what day?
The disease one, truth is we haven't set it yet, but we'll have it up on the website real soon.
Okay.
And if there's a date that doesn't work for you and you're here, you can influence that.
Yeah. So I was on my way anyway, and then, the new technology of cell phones, I finally had a cell phone. I forget when this was. A bunch of years ago, but I was like, hey, I could do this on my way there because it's a 4-hour drive. And I'm making all these calls, and I get my meeting, I go in and I pitch the thing, and they're like, well, we're already doing these cover crops and we use compost tea, but boy, it's a hassle. And I said, well, I can get rid of the compost tea problem for you. I got the concentrate, And he's like, yeah, right. And he stuck some in the corner in his plots because he could do it cheap. We already had funding to do the rest of it. And he got this pretty great result at the end of the season. And I said, oh, that's pretty good. It was like a 22 or 28% increase in yield by the end of the season. And that's okay. He goes, well, boy, you should have seen the first pick. And I was like, well, what? What happened? He goes, I don't know if I have the data on that. And so the next year, it's like you only have so much money. It's like you're betting your chips on a piece of research. It's going to take a year to get the information. So I was like, all right, move all the chips to the first pick. Collect all the data on the first pick. And that's when we saw the 50% increase in yield, which now we know that was the place to focus the money on. But until you do it and spend some money, you don't know.
But see, the great thing, what I love working with John and with Ron, is that we all get that it's not just John's product. It's not any one thing. It's the synergy of all the best practices.
Yeah.
you will get decent results. Just I know from experience, you can just fart around with John's char grow. It's so good, you'll get decent results. But if you ace everything else, you know, I'm not surprised. I was hearing reports of Leon's broccoli heads being like this. That probably wasn't just the charcoal. You know, he's doing charcoal, he's doing it with pea, and putting in good compost, that's great. He's also doing low till. I bet you he's doing great cover crops too. Those combinations are what give you.
And you probably had a pretty fertile soil, you know.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, when I, you know, Pat told me about biochar years ago, along with this guy Martin Webster, and I thought, yeah, that's crazy. Who could afford to make charcoal? I mean, how could you do that on a large scale? Forget it, you know. And then he goes, well, there's this guy at the University of Georgia, and he says he makes power, electricity, heat, and charcoal at the same time. I was like, okay, now I'm on it, you know. And I went down there, and they showed me their plots, which were old, and I was coming by like a year and a half later, I think. But it was, you know, it wasn't a droughty spring, so there's still moisture in the ground. And they showed me the picture, and it was biochar made in a couple barrels, biochar made with their system, you know, much taller corn, and then no biochar crummy corn. And it was all pretty fertile, the soil, and they even used chemical fertilizer on their plots. And then we walked over and we saw the poster of the University of Georgia's plots was on a big acreage, and beautiful poster. And I'm like, oh man, this is cool, this is cool. Reading along, and I get to the end, 0 result. They had 0 result on their big acreage. I was just like, must be a dead soil. He goes, why? Yeah, of course it's conventional agriculture and, you know, high salt fertilizer. You know, I'm thinking all the reasons it failed, and I'm like, how about yours? He goes, well, we had a little better soil, right? And I said, well, the proof will still be there. And there's something called a soil penetrometer, which is a pressure gauge on the end of a pole. I said, damn, I don't have my soil penetrometer with me. He goes, well, what's that? I said, it's a pressure gauge on the end of the pole. And the guy goes, well, you know, this used to be a soil lab here. All the junk's stored up above, up here. I said, well, let's go check that out. And this guy, Danny Day, who ran the facility, we go up there and he goes, I think I know what you're talking about. He's digging, he's throwing boxes all around. He's like, oh, that's it. And we grab him, we found the pressure gauge part, right? And I was like, well, this is half of the soil probe. Now we need the actual probe, you know? Oh, it's here. And he starts digging. And I look and they have a full machine shop. There's like 2 guys standing around twiddling their thumbs. I'm like, okay, give me a 28-inch rod with a point on it and screw fit to this. And I throw it down. The guy's like, okay, you know, he figures the boss told him to do it. You know? And Danny's still looking. 10 minutes, they had it built. I said, put it on there. Got to go, Danny. He's like, well, what? I got more to tell you. I'm like, outside, man. We're gonna do the soil probe test. And we went out and he has 2 assistants. I said, you guys take the data, and we did 10 pokes in each plot. And where the really good char was a 28% increase in rooting depth. Now what that meant is that the char and the biology interacted to increase the fluff of that soil. What this pressure gauge does is when you get to 300 psi, which is probably right about here, you know, you get to 300 psi in like 1/8 of an inch right here. 300 psi, the roots are only going to go down that far. But you go over here in the grass and 300 psi will maybe be a little different, a little deeper. Well, theirs was way deeper, and when the char was, it was 28% deeper. And I said, you make good char? He goes, well, how do you know? I said, it's 28% increase in rooting depth. That means the biology was affected. That's the proof. I'm in. Let's go. And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, who does your bioinoculation? And they're all just like, they weren't even thinking of that. They were just thinking, well, char, you throw it in the ground, it must do something good because we got a result. And I said, well, it's the biology interaction that didn't happen out there in their plot.
And it will do some good, but it'll take a long time.
It'll take a while.
You know, if you do the right things to prep it, you get an effect immediately. Otherwise, there are people putting char out in their fields and they're going to be disappointed that first year. I mean, maybe the first 2 years, it's going to suck up nutrients. You know, it's adsorptive. It just binds nutrients, you know. And also, it's high pH. So there's going to be issues there. I mean, Jon, what's the name of the scientist that was documented the carbon sequestering of no-till? And was testing his stuff. He said yours is the only one that wasn't too high pH.
You mean it's acidic, high pH?
Don, there's this guy.
That's low. High pH is the other way. It's base.
Don Rakowski. So he's the guy that got carbon credits to farmers in the Midwest who are doing no-till. And what was your question about him?
Well, remember he was testing your stuff, and he said so far yours, because of the nature of your biology, probably fungal aspect, right, was the only char he was working with that wasn't way too high a pH.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, because my char grow has a lot more than char. It's got biology.
Right.
And but the typical, I mean, this guy, 40 years in the business, he's a soil scientist. I mean, he's like top of the line, USDA. Yeah, I was like, he goes, yeah, and I added char to the soil, and man, I got no biological activity. I'm like, none, zero. He goes, not really. I said, well, tell me about your experiment. How'd that go? He goes, well, first I sieved the soil. Like a good soil scientist, he sieves it, and he's thinking about texture and getting it all sieved down so it's fine, and he can look under the microscope great. And then I dried it. And I was like, okay, you sieved it, you dried it, and then I put the char in. I was like, okay, when you sieved it, just the act of sieving it, you killed huge tons of biology. Then you dried it out and killed the rest. Then you put a dead thing in there. He goes, yeah, and the respiration hardly changed at all. And I said, got an idea. Don't sieve it next time, just put it in. What? I said, yeah, you killed it all the way through to before you add the char.
And don't dry it either.
And I said, but that's when I said, oh man, let me get you my stuff. Let me get you my stuff. We threw it in there, and he goes, oh, it's off the charts. Add water, kaboom. I'm like, yeah, it's loaded. Yours is deader than a doornail. Of course I'm going to win that deal. And that was fun because, he just, and I was like, dude, don't do that again. You killed all the biology on the way to testing biology. Don't do that. Keep the biology in it, put char with it, and then you can kind of start to see. And if the char was in there with moisture and it was through a whole season, now the char got loaded, now it's even going to be better.
But the straight I'm going with there is pay attention to your mycorrhizae too. And in fact, I wish while we were over at the compost site that we had looked under that holly tree.
Yeah, Pat still got to show me that.
Yeah. Well, we should maybe take a walk. Probably tired of sitting, right? You want to walk over to the compost site?